All right, welcome everybody.
Woohoo!
My guest today is Hannah Horowitz, who's become a very, very dear friend in a very short period of time here in Boulder. But Hannah, where are you calling in from today? You're not in Boulder now.
I am calling in right now from Glen Ellen, California, which is in Sonoma County, which is in the North Bay Area, which is also my hometown.
And you're also in your childhood home, is that right?
Yeah, in my childhood home, in my childhood bedroom at the moment. And I just turned around and showed Tucker like my childhood bookshelf.
Which is perfect, I think, for me to speak about OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, which is at least the theme that we're coming into this conversation with. We'll see where it goes. Hannah and I were at a little dinner party the other night and then just started talking about OCD and realized that we have a lot of similar, we've walked a similar path with OCD and how it's expressed and manifested itself in our lives. And we thought it would be a fun conversation to share, particularly how OCD continues to grow up and develop as we continue to grow up and develop, and it can take on new forms and new flavors, and it can kind of merge with spiritual insights and then merge with psychological insights and developmental insights. And some of that can be, for me, really beautiful and interesting creative ways for life to express itself. And in other ways, at times, it's created a lot of confusion and like brought on a new wave of I don't know what to call it. I would maybe classify it as some form of an anxiety, but it often now doesn't really manifest as anxiety and more manifest as thoughts arising that like uh, take on presence and awareness, and they funnel the attentional system into choice points. And my body doesn't normally feel too anxious, although on a very subtle level, I'm sure there's some of that there.
Mhm.
So, Hannah, where should we start?
Yeah. Well, I feel super excited what you're delineating with how kind of like the OCD mechanism can evolve and change through time, or even if the actual content of it doesn't shift that much, which I've noticed in my life, like the process behind it and the relationship to it shifts a great deal. And, I'm sure we'll get into that a lot, but it actually feels super appropriate right now that I'm in my childhood bedroom because this is the site of like where a lot of my OCD like occurred. Like I'm looking adjacent at my bed, which is where I had to do like so many rituals and say so many things. And, the bathroom is right next door, which is where a lot of things occurred for me too. So I feel very much in the field of it, but I'm also noticing how I'm bringing my grown up self to it with a lot more understanding and compassion and patience um, for those tendencies. Yeah. So maybe I don't know, maybe we could start by sharing a little bit about kind of our like journeys with it or how we started to notice OCD in our younger selves and how it's transitioned through time and then kind of pick it apart.
Sure. I also want to say upfront that I'm not a specialist in this. I'm not a licensed therapist or clinician. So everything I'm speaking about is purely based off my own personal life experience. And, and I'm using OCD as a bit of a catch-all for these types of experiences. Not so much in like a clinical diagnostic way, although I have been diagnosed with OCD by a professional clinician at one point in college, I believe that was. And Hannah, you are a therapist, and I'm curious, is this something that you work with from a more therapeutic license perspective?
Mhm. Yeah, I'm glad you said that about not being a specialist because I'll co-sign that. I mean, while I am a therapist, I am definitely not a specialist in OCD at all. And I am noticing in more of my clients that there's a presentation of OCD. So it's definitely feeling like I'm wanting more training in that regard and to deepen my understanding from the clinical lens. So I have the things that I notice both within clients and myself and a building of understanding, but definitely not a specialist here. And it feels like this conversation is just a really fun way to explore kind of these tendencies in our own development.
The part that feels most alive for me is around taking on the perspective of God, God creating the movie of this unfolding moment, this life, and how life could theoretically take on an infinite number of expressions, though the limits are unbounded. And so one of the ways in which life wants to experience itself is through this thing that we call OCD. And I guess my earliest memory of that would be watching the New York Yankees in the World Series. I didn't go to church or anything growing up, but I watched pretty much every single Yankees game for every single season and collected all the baseball cards and was pretty much a Yankees fundamentalist. And I remember, it was like a really intense moment in the game. I'm sitting on the living room in my childhood home, my living room couch, and my dad and my mom are next to me, and we're all watching the game. And there was some I'm gonna call it an awareness I had that how I am showing up in that moment is directly affecting the outcome of the baseball game. And so I would do things like swallow twice. Like if I drank a little bit of a sip of water, I would take 2 sips of water instead of 1 sip of water, because 2 sips was good luck and would increase the likelihood of the Yankees scoring a run to win the game. And if I only took 1 sip, that would surely curse my team, and it would create bad luck in the energetic field of the New York Yankees, and it would cause them to lose. And that would be in part, I don't think I ever thought it was fully my responsibility, but I felt like it was a co-creation with the universe. It was like maybe the universe has its plan, but if the universe attunes to what Tucker desires, then the universe will co-create it in reciprocity with me to generate an outcome that could bring, I guess for a little boy, a 6-year-old boy like I was, I don't know, joy, a sense of like an ecstatic experience. When the Yankees win the World Series, which they did a lot when I was a kid, they were like they were the best team in the league. It was, it felt like life or death. It felt like in that moment, this is the entire universe is this Yankees game. It is this moment. It is the bottom of the 9th inning. It is whether my player will do something to win the game. And I had been watching, over 100 games or however many games they play in baseball, almost ritually on a daily basis. And so it was like a massive part of my life, and the stakes felt so high as a young boy. And so the fact that I was able to have some control over that experience or of that process, I guess it's not so different from how when parents say, if you act like a good boy, Santa Claus will bring you gifts. And if you don't behave, you'll get coal or something. Like there's some way in which the experience of Christmas can be co-created by my behavior. And so my behavior for the Yankees was to be a devoted fan by having all these different rituals. And sometimes it involved not breathing. Like I would hold my breath for basically until they struck out the next player or something like that. And I would basically be on the verge of having a physical like meltdown in my body, but I was doing it in devotion of the team that I loved.
Yeah. I'm feeling into the kind of level of power. I don't know if it's quite the word, but of feeling like, wow, I'm like co-creating with the universe. Like what I do really matters here. And I'm wondering if you can recall how that felt for you as a young person to like kind of feel like you had that power.
Well, it's tricky though, right? Because it's I felt like I had some power, but I didn't feel like I had full sovereignty.
Totally.
Hannah and I will sometimes speak about the stages model of ego development, developed by Terry O'Fallon and Kim Barta and others that we've studied with, Alexander Love. And so in the stage 1.5, there's a sense of like having full power and sort of agency and control, sovereignty as a full being. And then at 2.0, there's a sense of reciprocity, the sense of, oh, other people can see me. Other people also have power. So if other people also have power, that means I don't have full power. I have partial power in this situation. And so it was, I want to say it was a little bit, it was more often scary than, because it was a sense of, I'm doing my best, but I'm not also in full control, but I'm going to do everything I can be to be in as much control as possible. And the rest is up to some sense of fate or trust or destiny or karma, or, you know, as a 6-year-old, what would I have? It just felt, I guess it felt like luck. It felt like luck, like I could increase the likelihood of luck playing out in my favor through the power that I had that was partial at best.
What you said there around kind of using as much power as we can, but there's still so much that's out of our control. It really mirrors something that my mom said to me when I was young, when she was noticing these different OCD tendencies, and said, like, you know, honey, like when we maybe start to become more aware and we realize that we don't have control over how everything is going to go, we want to find the ways that we can exert some control. And I remember the time that really kind of soothed me, because it gave some context, like, oh yeah, maybe that's like the underlying urge that's going on here, and that soothed me a bit. But I'm also really relating to and having compassion for the part of you that also felt like it was like scary. Like there's a certain power you have, and there's a lot that you are so aware of, even if it's kind of beneath the conscious level, that like you don't. And being in the dance of like the compulsion and the I don't know, I'm really feeling like the earnestness of young Tucker a lot as you're speaking, that like wanting his team, wanting his player, like wanting the world to be well.
Yeah. And that brings up a memory of being scared, you know, scared of the dark as a kid, and lying in bed, and maybe I watched a scary movie or something, had a bad dream, and it was like if I laid, say, on the left-hand side of my bed, on the left-hand side of my body in my bed, and I pulled the covers over like to my ear, but not to here, because if it was here, then there would be monsters. And if it was there, then the monsters would stay away. And then if I didn't move, so if I had to stay in super frozen and still, basically, if I put myself through these kind of, they felt in my memory, at least, of them. And of course, by the way, everything I'm saying here is just totally projecting my meaning making in the moment onto memories that are, you know, little bubbles of percolations that are arising now. And so caveating all that of like, we're weaving stories here and weaving memories and weaving our current meaning making onto childhood experiences, which of course are shaping the memory of those experiences in real time. So this, putting all that aside, yeah, there is a sense of like life would be really, really scary sometimes. You know, life is really frightening for a young boy that's worried that there's a monster under his bed. And then sometimes there were moments where it would up my courage. And so I'd say, Tucker, if you go down and look under the bed, you are going to have such a good day tomorrow. Like you're going to have the best day tomorrow. If you're strong and you're courageous and you look under the bed to make sure there's no monsters. And so I would basically use good luck as a courage mechanism to help motivate some sort of like larger self in me to come forward, some sort of fuller expression of kind of transcending the momentary fear to make sure there's no monsters and get a good night's sleep.
For you, it seems there was a lot tied to like, you know, if I do this, this might happen, or like X plus Y like might equal Z. Yeah, I guess how much like suffering did it feel like was within that process for you? Mhm.
I don't know, because how much suffering would exist for any child of that
Yeah.
age that's having these
Yeah.
types of thoughts. And so OCD maybe felt like a way to make sense of suffering that might have been there regardless, or might be somewhat
Mhm.
inevitable as part of the human experience. I'm curious how you would answer your own question. And also, I really want to hear about some of your the ways in which OCD manifested for you as a kid. And
Mhm.
I think it'd be interesting to eventually get to how it's expressing in our lives today, but so much
Totally.
of it feels like it was rooted back in those days.
Yeah. Um, I think it started to appear for me. Maybe I was about like 8 or 9. I can't quite remember the time, but it took the form of a lot of little rituals. The compulsion element of it was very strong. And it was a lot about things like feeling really correct, like in my body. Like, okay, if this hand towel is moved like 2 millimeters over, like that feels more right for me. So I want to get it right to the point that I will like get in and out of my bed, 9 times in a row to straighten the hand towel by a few millimeters, for instance. Or if I'm walking and I'm on the street and there's a bunch of leaves on the ground. Like I had the sense of it would feel better in my body if the leaves are all just moved a little bit more so it can like feel balanced. Or a litany of things that I'd have to say to my parents and my brother at nighttime, like over and over and over again until I got to the like amount that it felt right to express them where I could relax. So I think something I'm noticing that's maybe a little bit different in our experiences is I tended not to have the like, if I do this, then like this will happen, maybe as overtly when it comes to like a team winning or a monster under the bed. But it was a, like, if I do not do this thing, I won't feel right in my body, so then I can't relax. I just have to do it enough or get it out of my system so then I can be okay. If the hand towel feels like it's in the right position, then I can finally go to sleep. But it might just be a long journey with a lot of kind of arduous um neuroses to like get it to the place where it feels right. And I'd say that was the primary manifestation for me for many years. I never did any formal treatment. It kind of went away slowly and slowly on its own, though I'd say it's never fully gone away. I definitely still have a lot of those tendencies. They're just very muted in comparison to what they were. And yeah, I think the suffering question came for me because I definitely felt a lot of suffering in it at the time. Like I had the awareness of like, this isn't necessary. This actually isn't helping anything. It's kind of weird, but I can't not do it. And I think feeling that lack of control within my own internal system was a really bizarre and hard thing to witness, especially as I think I'd created like an ego structure around like functioning really well in all of these other realms. So when it came to not being able to understand what was going on inside of me that led to these um behaviors that I did understand didn't really have consequence over the world, it was a really confusing thing. Mhm. Yeah.
When you were speaking, I could it invited me more into the somatic aspect of OCD, and
Yeah.
there's a way in which I feel that those experiences, because totally it would first almost always come up somatically, and then a thought would arise for me of, so if there was something that felt off, like the towel, I totally had the towel example as well. It would just be this instant feeling in the body, like the energetic and the somatic body felt off. And almost like for people that crack their knuckles, like sometimes it just feels like it has to be cracked, it
Mhm.
just has to. You just got to do it. But imagine if cracking your knuckles was spread out amongst hundreds of daily little
All
events.
these little decision points.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the curiosity. And I'm even, as we're talking about it right now, I'm very aware, like my headphones are right there. And there's a sense in me of like, I would feel more correct if they were moved like an inch to the right. That just feels more aligned with the universe. But thankfully, there's enough spaciousness within me at this point where I'm kind of like, oh, like that's sweet inside of me. And actually, I don't feel like I really like need to do that. But the sense of being earlier in my development and kind of maybe projecting outwards, like things aren't right here. And if I can get things right on the external realm, then I can feel more right on the internal plane. And um and I do think that there are kind of some cool pieces within that, right? Of like action and like wanting to manipulate like in a healthy way the environment. Like I was really feeling when you said, okay, Tucker, if I like look and I'll feel proud of myself and I'll feel successful, like the kind of stepping stones that that can offer for feeling our own bravery or feeling our own ability to um do what we want, but then it's tied up with all of this other stuff in there, or some internalization, at least for me as a youth, of like, and if I don't do those things, then like maybe I'm bad. Or if I can't make the external, be that, in my family or the world I live in or whatever, in alignment with my vision, then I will not be okay.
Knowing a little bit about your childhood and having met your parents, and I think it's safe to say, let me know if you have a different perspective on this, that we both had fairly idyllic childhoods and we're financially stable and lived in beautiful neighborhoods and had good educations and all that. And so yeah, I guess I'm curious if you have a sense of if there's no sort of potentially capital T trauma in our lives at this point in our childhoods, where maybe this sense of feeling that there's something wrong with the external world that needs to be adjusted or fixed, where if there's seeds or memories in which that might have stemmed from.
Yeah. I think one is the death of my grandparents, and just I was at age 6 and 9, and I don't feel certain that's like a total correlation to this, but I think having just kind of the death awareness early on, and there was a sense of like, well, they're dying, like I will die. I've been interested in death from a really early age. And I think that had something to do with like, controlling things or like leaving one's mark. And I think also, you know, as a child, and I think this is really true of all children, like we're soaking up so much different information. And even if there are very idyllic elements of our youth, we might still be like, well, where can I fill the gap to like, if I'm just this way, then I can help my parents communicate a little bit better and then I'll feel more relaxed. Or like, there's this dynamic going on that probably is actually not really even in my conscious mind, but I'm learning to adapt to that to keep things more, harmonious. Um, and I can, yeah, just recall a lot of little like moments or seeds or noticing, like, I don't understand what's going on here in this family field or in this school environment that I'm in. But I have the sense that if I do things slightly differently, or if I alter, if I lend my energy here, or I play the good girl, or whatever, the really subtle internal manipulations, that will make things better. Right. So whether that's real or not, I think that also became part of my internal working model that then also manifested with the hand towel. How about for you?
What's arising is a memory of playing baseball when I was a little older, maybe 12, 11. I remember being at second base, and I would do these things like I would take my baseball glove off twice and then like hit it twice, and before every pitch, take my hat off, and did all these ritualistic visual cues. And of course, baseball culture, I would say, glorifies these rituals, and it's part of the America's pastime is to basically embrace OCD as a sign of it's part of the game in many ways. But I remember feeling some sense of like, if I do this thing with my glove and the ball gets hit to me on the next pitch, I'm gonna be more likely to get the out and essentially not embarrass myself. So it was a little bit of like an anti-shame mechanism of I don't want to disappoint my teammates or be the guy that fucks up, or like I want to do I don't want to embarrass myself. And I feel a lot of compassion for that younger self that essentially was having social anxiety arise and was attempting to minimize it by doing these rituals that would then boost my inner confidence, that would then, be, I want to say, like, from a experiential objective perspective, it would increase the likelihood of doing a good job. Because if I'm confident, and I'm going to be generally more likely to sort of handle the play with ease. And so it kind of worked. Like it generally worked. And then if I messed up a play, then I would just double the rituals, and I would double the amount of intensity I would put into the OCD that would then help to make up for some of the lost confidence. And just became a coping strategy.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious what parts of that are still present in your like day to day, if we're taking it a little bit into what do we notice now of how it shows up or how we relate to it.
Yeah. Well, I just moved my cursor to go to the mute button, and before it was on the right-hand side of my screen. And as I was moving it to the mute button, I was like, should I move it back to the right-hand side of the screen or keep it on the mute button? And sort of objectively speaking, it would make more rational sense to keep it on the mute button, because that's the place I'm gonna want to pause if there's background noise in my house. But the right-hand side of my screen, when I move the cursor over there, and this has been with me since I got my first laptop in 4th grade, that's like the good luck place for the mouse cursor to live when it's not in use. And so there is just a moment there is like, well, how's the podcast going so far? And I was like, well, I think it's going pretty good so far. So I should probably keep the cursor on the right-hand side, because then, the rest of it will play out. And then there was another sort of awareness that was like, well, okay, but that's silly. And so keep it on the mouse, it'll be okay. And that all happened in probably 1.5 seconds at most. And in the body, sometimes the body will override the rational reasoning that happens, super quick in the mind. And sometimes it's not even the mind, it's awareness itself that's just it's just like lightning. It's picking up the pattern at lightning speed, and the mind doesn't even have time to generate a thought process about it. But there's like a pattern recognition that almost occurs somatically, energetically in the field of awareness. And if the energy is stuck in the body, then sometimes it's just a feeling of, well, I know this is irrational, but my body will feel more at ease doing the irrational thing, and then the moment will unfold and move on, and I won't stay sort of like, it's almost like consciousness itself will unknot itself from this little looping experience of not knowing or wondering or questioning whether the mouse is in the wrong place on the computer screen. Mm-hmm. So again, these things happen in like split seconds. Sometimes they play out longer for maybe 10 seconds or 15 seconds, but generally it's just like choo, choo, and they're firing kind of all the time. And the opacity, the thickness of them is somewhat dependent on, I would say, how life is experiencing itself. If life is experiencing itself as confident, and if life is experiencing itself as full and in flow, then a lot of the times the bubbles sort of just pop quicker. And if not, there's a sense of the bubbles kind of stick around longer. And it's like, are you sure you don't want to follow this bubble? Mm-hmm. It might really help. It might.
I'm laughing because I'm like super resonating with how you're sharing that information and the quick blips, and feeling into how there's like a lot of like energy that goes into all of these micro decisions kind of all the time. And there's a way in which it seems like that can also like kind of feed back to the organism to like provide energy for like other decisions. I'm feeling the kind of like reciprocal nature of the relationship to OCD, or to, I don't even know if that would probably be called OCD. I don't really know, but like that experience that you described, right, with the mouse, and like these long-standing rituals and how you've related to that and allowed it to shift over time. But yeah, something in me actually feels fun about that. I don't know why or where that's coming from, but kind of this like all of the really rapid energy that kind of creates this driving force like for life. And I also know there's a lot of ways that can be like energy sucking, right? And if we're spending so much time making all of these decisions or touching the door handle like 20 times in a row, then that's so much energy that's going away. But yeah, something in me is just moving with that.
So
Are you with me?
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, I think it can be fun in a number of ways. One is that because there's because there's a lot of loosening between the sense of egoic self, individual self, the sense of awareness self, the sense of physical self, the sense of energetic self, the sense of soul self, the sense of spirit self. There's all these different selves that we can not just construct, but also full on experience a sense of self as being an individual I able. There's a full on experience of being oneness. There's a full on experience of being some sort of like a shape shifting soul that is embodying as this lifetime. And because for whatever reason in this moment in my life, there's a way in which I can choose which perspective to experience the moment in. Yeah. And so a moment will arise where there's an OCD tendency, and it's like, well, which hall-on of wholeness do I want to experience this from? And sometimes it's like, yeah, let's like really experience it from the Tucker self, with his shadow and his trauma and his life challenges and blah blah. And it's like, and it gets all into it and it makes a big deal and stuff. And there's also like a witness that is watching that play out and kind of laughing, but also feeling compassion. It's like it's sort of a smiling Buddha type of quality. And then there can be this sense of like actually being the anxiety itself, or the curiosity, or the physical embodied somatic intensity. And it's a sense of like being fully merged as it and with it, and that can be a really intense experience. It's like going into the depths of the most it's like the most meaty. It's almost like you can reach out and grab it and experience, feel it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then there can just be the experience of like just another passing cloud, it's just another unfolding. Oh, it's even as it's arising, it's shape-shifting and leaving. It's birth and death are not, there's no time, there's no sort of boundary to it. It's just like this, it's just shape-shifting life doing what everything else is doing. And there's no real difference. It's just expressing itself as that, and experiencing itself as that, and also witnessing itself as that. And so it's like kind of like going to a restaurant and you have this menu and there's this all these, and it's yeah, who's the one that's choosing that? And then okay, well, you can investigate that, and then that's gone. And so there's, it's like a carnival for God, or you go, I remember going into Chuck E. Cheese when I was a kid, and you just have all these toys and all these places you can go, and it's like, whoa, there's so many different ways to experience what's being experienced, and at the same moment, at the same time, so to speak, exactly what is being experienced is exactly what is being experienced is exactly what is being experienced, and it's just all wound up as one. So I would say it's mind. It's not. It's on a non-conceptual level. It's freaky.
I'm thinking about when I was 22 and I started seeing my current teacher, Diana Zahir, who has been a really major mentor in my own growth and development. But she was the first person that I started to talk about OCD with, aside from my mom, in terms of kind of seeking any support or context around that. And just so gently and softly, she'd kind of explain, like, yeah, sometimes we can have these different experiences or wanting to do things. And can we allow ourselves just a little breath and maybe put it on like a shelf, like in our mind? Like, oh, there's the shelf. Like, there's the thing that I want to do. Like, I don't have to get rid of it or hide it from myself. Like, it's on the shelf. So maybe I can choose how I want to engage with it. And she said it, I'm sure, a lot more eloquently than that, but that's just what's kind of stuck out in my mind as one of the first invitations to start to create some space internally from the experience. Right? Like, if I'm choosing to do this thing, and I still do it all the time now as a more like adult woman therapist, where I'm like, I don't really need to move this thing or say this in all of these different ways or touch this in a very specific pattern of, I do a lot of things in quadrants of eights, and I do a lot of kind of small movements with my hand, and I do a lot of like internal somatic balancing. But it's like, can I actually let myself go into that from a space of like, ah, like, look, that's what Hannah's doing right now. Like, can we have a moment where we just like really allow that and then like we'll come out of it? And maybe there are times where it's not as supportive to allow that. So can I kind of start to create the inner space to know over time, like choose my spots, so to speak, while also held exactly as you said, and just kind of the whole grand thing of like, wow, isn't this interesting? And like that it's like held in an attitude of, for me, humor and wholeness and like hilarity at my manifestation going about doing its little things. Um, and what I see in working with people in maybe earlier stages of working supportively with their OCD is that that space inside doesn't exist yet. It just feels like the grasp in which they like have to exist. And anyway, I don't really know how to work with that yet, besides maybe teaching softness or more spaciousness or self-compassion, or understanding where those different patterns and whatnot come from. But I'm really resonating with you allowing yourself to see and be all of the different orientations to self and the specific action that you're doing.
Yeah. I don't know if you've had this experience or these experiences, but yeah, there can be a way in which now I can get very construct wary with the story. And so it's like, oh, if I don't kiss this tree, then I'm going to get an email in a few minutes that's going to be bad news. So, there's going to be an email that I'm not going to want to get. And so and then I'm like, okay, well, that's a story. I can deconstruct that. Okay, now it's deconstructed. But then there's this way of being like, yeah, but my body still feels that feeling.
Mm-hmm.
So the story's deconstructed, but the feeling is still there. And so maybe the fact that it's a story is also a story. And then maybe it is real. And how do I know it's not real? How do I know I'm not receiving a psychic, psychic flash of the future arising now that then can be shapeshifted into a different future by sort of reshuffling the consciousness deck, so to speak. And then kissing the tree is like a way of reshuffling. And then this whole process of being like, well, what is reality, and then what is the self, and who, and it's like, and again, this all happens in split seconds. This is not how I'm speaking it out loud now, where it's one thought at a time. It's the thoughts are arising at the same time, and the thoughts are like, it's like you see the whole deck of cards at the same time, and there's 52 thoughts, and they're all co-arising. And I can go in and look at one card at a time, but often I just look at the whole deck, and then it kind of becomes a hall of mirrors thing where it's like, and it's yeah. And then it's a sense of actually not knowing which of the cards represent reality. And then, so none of them represent reality, but then if none of them represent reality, all of them represent reality. And then sometimes there can be a choice point in that of being like, okay, well, which one feels most loving? And maybe that's most loving for the tree. Maybe I'm like, you know what? Fuck it. I should just kiss the tree. It's a beautiful tree. I'm going to kiss the tree. I love kissing trees. I kiss the tree. Sometimes it can be most loving for myself of like, I've had a stressful day. I'm just going to allow myself to play this O.C.D game. And, here we are.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it's not such a rational process. It's more of just like, it's just like life just moves in certain directions. And yeah, can you relate to that?
Oh, 1,000%. In all the split secondness, and then all of a sudden we're out here and we're wondering what on earth is going on with being a person on this planet and how much any of it matters, and decisions and consequences and construction and deconstruction of who I am through time. As you were speaking about, kind of what feels the kindness, like, I just want to hug this tree, or I've had a stressful day, like, let's just do the O.C.D game. I'm really feeling I think the balm that bringing warmth to ourselves gives to all the parts that are like confused. I really just noticed that in my own journey, or seeing that with other clients, of like, okay, if we can learn to bring some more of that questioning, what's the kindest or what's the warmest thing I can do here? Or maybe what is it to just allow myself to be a simple human body that has a strong desire to do a bizarre O.C.D tendency, and then like do it. Like how that can actually be really soothing, and not just soothing to the like O.C.D mechanism, but soothing to like just our broader selves that are here grappling with what we're doing on this planet to begin with, and getting to build that through time. So I'm really feeling like the warmth of that. Were you gonna say something?
Oh, I had so many things arise, but go on. I want to hear what you're gonna say.
I was gonna speak to an experience I had last night, which is I was lying in bed and I was having some kind of stress dreams, and I have 3 minorly stressful things to do today, just because they include some unknowns. Right. And this was one of them. And I had the full understanding of like, cool, Tucker and I will probably have a good conversation. And even if we don't, like, that's okay. Like, he'll probably still want to be my friend. Like, I was able to like hold all of that, but there was still the unknown of my mind trying to come in and fill the gap. And I was awake in the middle of the night and I was just feeling all of this anxiety in my body. And I was doing some shadow work with it and like, like it's actually all totally okay. I'm relaxed. I'm safe. I know that all these unknown things will be navigated with a lot of ease. And even if they're not, I know I'll be able to hold that. But it was still such the somatic experience of like, no, we like don't want to release. And I don't even know if I have that much more to say about it, but I do think naming the difference between what we can really know, in our minds and what our bodies are still catching up with is really important, especially when it comes to OCD tendencies and like how we work with those, kindly and patiently.
Yeah, for me, that brings up the therapeutic aspect. And I can talk about when I worked with the OCD specialist in college, but there was really not much to the story other than I think I did like 4 or 5 sessions and basically overcame my OCD. And she said that I was the fastest client to ever overcome the severity. I wasn't a severe case of OCD, but the level of OCD I had.
Mhm.
So I felt really proud of myself in that moment. And basically what I did at that time was, it's kind of a 3.5 technique of thinking about your thinking. And so it was I basically said, if I do the OCD tendency, then I will have bad luck.
Hmm.
And so I just tricked myself essentially. The feeling, the underlying feeling of there being some level of control I can have over creating the universe and manifesting my reality still was there, but I just reversed it so that the physical activation of that feeling became normal, which then became the good luck. So that like kind of worked for a while, I guess. I mean,
Mhm.
never has this been extremely debilitating in my life or anything like that. But then, I kind of began deconstructing that story and all that stuff when a few years ago, and it sort of started to come back in new ways. And I started working with Kim Barta. Um, and yeah, the way that I found to be most healing is to basically through going through a shadow resolution process, coming into this little boy, this maybe 5, 4, 6-year-old boy who's just scared. He just wants life um, to be okay. He doesn't want to get hurt. He wants to be liked. He just wants everything to be good. He wants to be good. And then there's this sense of holding that little boy and hugging him and saying it's all going to be okay and I got you, and making him feel really safe and really protected, and just enveloping him in warmth. And then when the little boy is like, yeah, but what about when life's challenges arise, because they will arise, and this sort of imaginal scene or the world that's playing out in the subtle realm is me at this beach that I used to go to in Connecticut, my adult self holding the little 4-year-old on my shoulders, and the waves they're quite strong waves at this beach, and it's like we go into the waves and we're like, yeah, and we just pile through them, and the waves represent all of life's inevitable challenges. And there's just a sense of like, actually life's challenges can be fun and they can be creative, and like, I got you, I'm not going to let you drown, or I'm not going to let you go. um and so the reason why I wanted to share that is because even though the mind can deconstruct and reconstruct, and the stories, like you said, the body and the energy can still feel stuck. But then the way that's helped me to navigate that is to be with this little boy and to feel the little boy in me, I guess, somatically and energetically and imaginally, and allow allow that sense of deep holding to ease the symptoms that arise somatically and energetically. And then there's a way in which I can feel life or the universe holding adult Tucker, holding Tucker, and like this, it's like the shape, the heart of love is sort of holding on to the snow globe in which the scene is arising in, and it is the scene, but it's also sort of there witnessing and holding the scene at the same time. Yeah. And so sometimes now when I go past a tree and I trying to decide if I kiss it, I just do little mini parts work and go back into that little boy and just feel him, and then it just kind of passes that way as well.
I just a big smile is on my face because it's just really, really sweet. Like I just feel this vision of how we can really hold ourselves through time and in spaces of unknowns, and caring for our young parts that like maybe really, really just want to know what's going on or have it right or be safe. And, funnel that energy into the way we move our mouths or the hand towel to keep coming back to it. But yeah, like what's that like underlying urge? And I feel so strongly that it is, can I be safe like in the world? And can I roll with the waves? And can I find like belonging, in myself or the systems that I exist in without necessarily having to, exert a certain kind of control? Mm-hmm. Can I be, and can that also be okay and involve trust?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that's where it can get, when the mind sort of starts to spin, it can get tricky because, when I was younger, like in the Yankees scenario, it was sort of, I was praying to the baseball gods, I was praying to whatever spirit was in charge of making sure the Yankees win. And good job, by the way, Yankee spirit. They won like 10 years in a row. And then when
you had a large hand to play in that, Tucker.
Yeah. Wait. Whoa. I am the Yankees spirit god. Oh. Yes. And then a little bit later, like later in life, it became more about the world, about the physical world, about the environmental world in which I'm surrounded in, and then it sort of became a little bit more about like maybe the emotional world and the world of love and relationships, and then now it's kind of at this place most of the time where the spirits don't really exist, but they exist. The world doesn't really exist, but it exists. This planet doesn't really exist, but it exists. The sort of vast universe, the galaxies don't really exist, but also exist. But what does exist with 100% experiential certainty is exactly this. Exactly this moment, exactly what is right here, right now, so to speak. And it can't really be put into words, but it's just simply this. And so from the unbounded yet sometimes experientially small like it feels like the universe is just this conversation with Hannah, and this is just life expressing itself as this exact sentence and this bamboo desk and this O.C.D pattern. And so it's like God itself is in reciprocity with itself as O.C.D tendency, and manifested as a Tucker experience, or sometimes not a Tucker experience. And it just gets wild at that point, because it's not really like Tucker an individual human in a planet of 8 billion people in a giant galaxy is experiencing a singular case of OCD. It's like the entire cosmos is experiencing OCD.
Yeah.
And conceptualizing this thing called OCD and experiencing all of the other kind of truths that can be held in that unbounded field of possibility in which the moment unfolds in and as. And that's where there's, even sometimes in that, when the moment is there can be the sense of like, yeah, no, there's no parts work in the world that can kind of
yeah, for sure.
That's just a trip.
For sure. Yeah, I'm having the experience of one of just kind of wanting to like lean back into that, what you said, of like there's really no parts work and basking in it. And two of I think I'm at a space now where I do feel a lot of gratitude for the OCD mechanism as it plays out in me, because I think it's really shown me a lot of contours of mind and has been a way of kind of like holding up a microscope to the nature of mind, that I've had support in, or I've had enough space and kind of examining, so it's felt positive. But how I do feel like it can be such a vehicle of learning more about ourselves, for where we're really holding on to certain structures, or where we have space to loosen, or where we just have to surrender. Yeah, there's just a lot coming up there for me about the way that it can be a relationship that can help us grow into the concentric circles of like, here's me, here's the OCD mechanism, like here's the do, and that is then the broader social systems that we're in that also have maybe a lot of similar OCD mechanism, even if it's not as specific. And then here's like the nature of like the order of the cosmos and the universe that has certain laws it follows, and which I also don't understand like at all. So kind of like the microcosm of all of the bigger workings. I have no idea if any of that is even relevant, but I'm just feeling into it.
What I heard and what you're sharing is almost an invitation into embracing OCD as a catalyst or a vehicle for whatever we want to, whatever that wants to be, whether it's awakening or deepening or healing or intimacy with life or intimacy with self or intimacy with all, or compassion for others, compassion for the sort of social systems and societal constructs that have perhaps co-created this experience of OCD in some way by helping to create certain sets of conditions in which this tendency of the human experience arises in the first place. And so like, when does dis-ease become easeful transformation into further unfolding of love? Not that OCD is a disease, as far as I know. I don't think it is. Not in my construction, but I don't know if it's from a medical perspective, if it is.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I think that's a beautiful way to put that. The dis-ease, like the dis-ease I felt in my body laying in bed last night, or the dis-ease I felt in going 4 feet out of the way to touch something in a really specific way, so then I could move on. But can I actually be present with myself in those moments as a vehicle of letting love flow?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
One way that I love to do that is to now, when I allow myself to just go, and when I just surrender into the experience of doing some OCD thing, there's a way in which it can sometimes feel like a prayer, or not just sometimes, but I can consciously create it as a prayer. And that's beautiful. Like, what a beautiful way to
Mm-hmm.
be in reciprocity with life, to be in devotion to the moment, to be constructing reality as a like a kiss to life itself. And maybe that life has a directionality or an intention or an attachment or a desire or a longing in some form. But for me, what prayer is not just necessarily holding on to an attachment and asking for it, but it's stating what I want to life itself, and then letting go and sort of trusting in what is returned. And there's some way in which the OCD ritual process, if you will, can become a ceremony to create prayers of love into, I don't know, into love itself.
Yeah.
Because a lot of it is just, it's a sense of the prayer is sometimes is granted via the asking of the prayer, like if I get into a devotional state and just feel, and just like, God, please grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. Already I feel I'm in a different state than I was 10 seconds ago. And so the prayer is already answered by the enacting of the prayer. And there's a way in which OCD can also play out in that experiential way for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I notice in my own life, when the OCD urges come, if I can sit back with it and be like, all right, we're having a little maybe pattern interruption in how I've like perceived the way this will go, or in my moment. Right? And the reality is life is full of pattern interruptions all the time, be they, coming from some internal driver or something that happens, on the concrete level. Like, okay. Wow, one of the greatest realities. There's a pattern interruption in front of me right now. I'm sure there'll be just like a million more to come. And even if the OCD wants to do things in a really specific way, I use that as a vehicle to then, flow. Can I take a breath and be like, wow, the reality is I have no control or idea of what's going to come, even from within, the context of my own mind or body. Like, just returning to that again and again as some sort of ground to, I think, continually reconcile one to, and not the kind of reconciliation that's like, all right, well, I just have to like make peace with this, but like a broader like reconciliation to life. Like, all right, as long as I'm here, I'm working with these certain personality structures, and I might, I've gone through different ways of deconstructing how they're not necessarily true or whatever, and yet they also are. And like, how can, we hold those together? And yeah, I think the OCD is an aid to that for me.
You mentioned death earlier. I'm curious about your relationship with death, and if that relationship has changed over time, if that's also impacted your relationship with the OCD tendencies?
I think so. I wouldn't have put that together without you asking, but I've spent time doing hospice work and I've read a lot about death and um, been with bodies that are very, near to dying and those final breaths. And yeah, I think there's just something that death brings so to the forefront of the mystery that maybe I felt enough peace or ease or support from my surroundings or whatever to like lean into the mystery, and which feels just so vast that it kind of feels like the OCD mechanism has a lot of like space to like play. It's like putting like a drop of water, into like a pool in which that water can just kind of like dissolve and flow. Like the container of it isn't so small. So in exploring death, it's brought a broader just like container for the whole like mystery of all of this game, in which case the OCD just feels like it gets to be a little piece within it that doesn't have to hold quite as much weight, I guess.
Yeah.
Mhm. For you, have there been any maybe exploration of certain topics or major shifts in your life that have loosened that?
In general, there seems to be less with the greater, I would say, acceptance of what is. There's less of a desire for what is to be different, even if the what is wanting reality to be different. And with that, it's almost like the OCD sometimes still occurs, but there's not focus on it as much. It's like I'm breathing, but I'm not consciously spending conscious energy on the fact that I'm breathing. It's just mostly just breathing. And so sometimes the patterning just sort of plays out like breathing, but not in a way that it's like in a way that's causing harm or suffering. It's not like a numbing or a disassociating. It's just a sense of this is what is what is what is. And there's like these moments that arise that where a burst of energy comes as a wanting to look or deepen or examine or soften the OCD experience. And then, but more often than not, it's just it's like a pet, or it's just like a way, it's just a part of reality that reality has gotten used to. And in that way, it feels very freeing. There doesn't feel to be any sense of discomfort or disease with it until there is, and then there is.
For sure. Yeah, that feels kind of like a sweet thing to know, or end on with that, like, healing OCD or whatever isn't about it going away necessarily. Like, yeah, of course. And neither of you or I had like really like extreme manifestations, it sounds like. Um, but what it is to really like companion that experience and find freedom in the companioning of it too.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then looking back at childhood and feeling gratitude for, obviously I'm making this up, but it theoretically would feel true to say that experience of being so attuned with my body, with the energy, with the reciprocity of the different characters that are in my surroundings, created a lot of strength in the muscles of those capacities that I think have paid off really brilliantly in my life. Like as a photojournalist, going down the street and you're just looking and constantly attuning for that micro moment, that split second where you get the perfect snapshot. And so much of OCD experience as a little child was kind of like wading through the world, looking for the little tiniest things that might be off, and to create the sense of perfection in my environment. And then boom, like there's this like release that happens that can sometimes feel like static. And then so there's so many, and in the way those kind of grow up into spiritual capacities, or developmental catalysts, or relational interpersonal relating capacities of sort of being aware of more than just the spoken words. And I feel like OCD has been a blessing in all of those ways.
Mm-hmm. I fully feel that. And again, I'm working with a small sample size and not a specialist, but what I notice of other folks that
she froze. Maybe it's because I didn't do something that was OCD like that brought bad luck, and now Hannah froze. Just joking. Oh, you're back now.
I'm back. Okay, you're back too. Hi. You were frozen in like a very like erect, dynamic, wide-eyed position.
Yes.
I think I was saying that I notice that the folks that I see who have more OCD tend to be like really sensitive, like artistic, like highly emotional people. And I can't say or not how that relates to OCD, or if that's the case for all people. Like I really like don't know. But yeah, I'm just feeling a lot of like compassion and curiosity for that like sensitivity that you're speaking to, of like the perfect shot and all of these different things, and like the ideal vision that like can become manifest, and how it's a journey to make peace with that, what we can do and also what we just totally can't, and what might remain not possible.
Yeah. Is there anything else that feels alive for you to share? Speak to?
Just that I'm feeling in my childhood home and everything, just so much gratitude for my parents, who I think held that really well. I think they didn't really understand or have context for OCD themselves, but they were really like loving and tried to understand me. And I think that really, really makes a huge difference. And so whether that's coming from our parents or our teachers or community members or from ourselves, like that's really just one of my main like glowing kind of embodied senses from this conversation of like, oh, when we bring warmth to this, it can have the potential to maybe actually be something special.
Beautiful. Thank you, Hannah's mom and dad. I would thank my parents, but I don't know if I can't really recall ever opening up to them about this, or them having a direct relationship with the most 99% of these experiences have remained something between myself and I, so to speak. And So yeah, it's actually feels very lovely to be able to talk about this stuff out loud, and to do so publicly, and to do so with no feeling of shame or embarrassment or anything. I just feel like delight and curiosity, and the gift of OCD being able to bring us together and have this conversation and experience, and to be able to share it, and may or may not help somebody else with their weird neurosis stuff.
If so, if it helps you or not, but if you happen to be listening and you resonate, like I'm down to talk about it. This is actually one of the most in-depth conversations I've ever had. Um, I think about it, Tucker, and it feels really good to just feel that kind of like, oh, this is a way that we're kind of like the same, and it's like kind of weird, but it's also funny. Like I feel it just feels good to talk about.
Yeah, it is funny, isn't it?
It's very strange. Thank you
Thank
for
you, Hannah.
inviting me and initiating this conversation. It's been fun.
Yeah, thank you. Enjoy your childhood home.
I will indeed.
Ciao.
Okay, bye bye.